What if I told you that a single policy decision could reshape the future of America's automobile industry, impact every driver's wallet, and potentially redefine our relationship with energy for decades to come? Today, we're diving deep into one of the most significant regulatory shifts in American automotive history, a decision that affects 17 million new cars sold annually, influences over $1 trillion in automotive manufacturing, and touches the lives of nearly every American driver. The Trump administration has announced plans to roll back fuel efficiency standards, rules that determine how many miles per gallon the average new car must achieve. But this isn't just about miles per gallon or emissions numbers. This is about the intersection of economics, technology, consumer choice, and America's energy future. Whether you drive an electric vehicle, a pickup truck, or a family sedan, this decision will impact you. Whether you're an investor, a worker in the automotive sector, or simply someone who fills up at the gas pump, the ripple effects of this policy shift will reach your life in ways you might not expect. So today we're going to analyze this comprehensively. We'll examine the facts, explore the long-term implications through the lens of sound economic thinking, consider multiple scenarios, and understand what this means for markets, industries, and everyday Americans. Stay with me because by the end of this video, you'll understand not just what happened, but what it really means for the road ahead. But before we dive in, if you appreciate thorough, unbiased analysis that goes beyond the headlines, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Let's get started. Let me lay out exactly what we're discussing here, because understanding the background is crucial to grasping the full picture. Fuel efficiency standards, technically known as corporate average fuel economy, or CAFE standards, are federal regulations that mandate how many miles per gallon the average vehicle produced by each manufacturer must achieve. These standards were first introduced in 1975, following the oil crisis of the early 1970s, when Americans faced long lines at gas stations and gasoline shortages. The original goal was straightforward: reduce America's dependence on foreign oil by making vehicles more efficient. Over the decades, these standards have been gradually tightened, requiring automakers to produce increasingly fuel-efficient fleets. In 2012, the Obama administration established some of the most aggressive fuel efficiency targets in American history. These standards called for the average fuel economy of new cars and light trucks to reach 54.5 miles per gallon by 2025. To put that in perspective, the average fuel economy in 2012 was about 33 miles per gallon for cars and 24 miles per gallon for light trucks. This represented an ambitious 40% improvement over just 13 years. The regulations were designed to reduce oil consumption by approximately 12 billion barrels and decrease carbon dioxide emissions by roughly 6 billion metric tons over the lifetime of vehicles sold during this period. Supporters argued these standards would save consumers money at the pump, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, spur innovation in automotive technology, and improve public health through reduced air pollution. The administration estimated that despite higher upfront vehicle costs, estimated at about $2,000 per vehicle by 2025, consumers would save approximately $1.7 trillion in fuel costs. Here's where the story gets more complex. Initially in 2012, major automakers publicly supported these standards. Ford, General Motors, Chrysler, and others signed agreements with the federal government endorsing the targets. However, by 2016 and 2017, the tune had changed significantly. Automakers began arguing that the standards were too stringent, too expensive to meet, and out of sync with consumer preferences. They pointed to several factors. First, gasoline prices had fallen dramatically from their 2008 highs. In 2008, gas reached over $4 per gallon nationally. By 2016, prices had dropped to around $2 per gallon in many markets. Second, American consumers had shifted their preferences dramatically toward larger vehicles, SUVs, crossovers, and pickup trucks, and away from smaller, more efficient sedans. By 2019, trucks and SUVs accounted for nearly 70% of new vehicle sales, compared to just 50% a decade earlier. Third, automakers argued that the costs of compliance, investing in new technologies like advanced engines, lightweight materials, and electrification were higher than originally projected, and these costs would be passed on to consumers. In 2018, the Trump administration proposed rolling back the Obama-era standards. The proposed rule, finalized in 2020, established a requirement for about 40 miles per gallon by 2026 instead of 54.5 by 2025, a significant reduction in stringency. The administration's stated rationale included several key points. 1. The Obama standards were too expensive and would increase vehicle prices, pushing consumers to keep older, less safe vehicles longer. 2. The standards didn't reflect real-world consumer preferences for larger vehicles. 3. Lower fuel prices reduced the economic incentive for fuel efficiency. 4. States like California shouldn't be allowed to set their own stricter standards that create a patchwork regulatory system. This last point sparked significant controversy. California, under a decades-old waiver granted by the EPA, has the authority to set its own vehicle emission standards, and about a dozen other states have chosen to follow California's rules, representing roughly 1/3 of the U.S. auto market. When the Biden administration took office in January 2021, one of its early priorities was reversing the Trump-era rollback. By 2021, new standards were proposed that would require the industry average to reach approximately 49 miles per gallon by 2026, with even more aggressive targets for the years following. These standards represented a middle ground, not as aggressive as the original Obama targets, but significantly more stringent than the Trump rollback. The Biden EPA also restored California's waiver, allowing the state to maintain its own, more aggressive standards. The Biden administration argued that technology had advanced significantly, making higher efficiency more achievable and affordable. They pointed to the rapid growth of electric vehicles, improvements in battery technology, and the declining costs of electrification. By 2023, electric vehicle sales in the United States had grown to nearly 8% of new car sales, up from just 2% in 2019. Major automakers had announced tens of billions of dollars in investments in electric vehicle production. Now, we arrive at the present situation. The Trump administration has announced intentions to once again roll back these fuel efficiency standards, while specific details are still being finalized through the regulatory process. The direction is clear, moving away from the Biden administration's aggressive targets toward more relaxed requirements. This represents the third major shift in fuel efficiency policy in less than a decade, from Obama to Trump to Biden, and now back to Trump. This regulatory whiplash has created significant uncertainty for an industry that typically plans product development cycles 5-7 years in advance. Let's ground ourselves in some concrete numbers to understand the scale we're discussing. The U.S. light-duty vehicle fleet consumes approximately 140 billion gallons of gasoline annually. Americans drive roughly 3.2 trillion miles per year. The automotive industry directly employs about 1 million Americans. When you include suppliers, dealers, and related industries, vehicle manufacturing supports nearly 10 million jobs. New vehicle sales average about 17 million units per year in the United States. The average new vehicle price in 2024 is approximately $48,000. Americans spend roughly $400 billion on gasoline annually. Any change to fuel efficiency standards ripples through all these numbers. A requirement change of just 1 mile per gallon, when multiplied across 17 million vehicles over their lifetimes, translates to billions of gallons of fuel and billions of dollars in consumer spending. To fully understand this issue, we need to recognize who the key stakeholders are. Automakers, companies like GM, Ford, Stellantis, Toyota, Honda, and others who must engineer and manufacture vehicles to meet the standards. Consumers, the American public who purchases vehicles and pays for fuel, maintenance, and the upfront cost of new technology. Oil and gas industry, companies whose product demand is directly affected by vehicle efficiency. Environmental groups, organizations focused on reducing emissions and combating climate change. State governments, particularly California, and states that follow its standards, who have their own policy priorities. Suppliers, the vast network of parts manufacturers who must develop new technologies to help automakers meet standards. Workers, union and non-union workers in manufacturing, whose jobs depend on the industry's health. Each of these stakeholders has different priorities, different economic interests, and different views on what constitutes the optimal policy. This complexity is precisely why fuel efficiency standards have become such a contentious policy battleground. Now that we have the factual foundation, let's analyze what this really means through the lens of long-term economic thinking. Now let's step back from the policy details and think about the situation the way Warren Buffett might analyze a complex business and economic question. Buffett's investment philosophy has always emphasized understanding the fundamentals, thinking long-term, and recognizing what's truly within your circle of competence. One of Buffett's core concepts is the economic moat, the durable competitive advantage that allows a business to maintain profitability over time. When we look at the automotive industry through this lens, we see something fascinating. The traditional American automakers, Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis, built their moats on scale, manufacturing expertise, dealer networks, and brand loyalty. For decades, these moats were formidable. But today, we're witnessing a potential shift in what creates competitive advantage in the automotive sector. Electric vehicles and advanced automotive technology are redefining the moat. Software, battery technology, autonomous driving capabilities, and electric powertrains are becoming the new sources of competitive advantage. Companies like Tesla, which didn't exist in its current form 20 years ago, have market valuations that periodically exceeded all traditional automakers combined. Here's where fuel efficiency standards intersect with competitive dynamics. These regulations effectively accelerate or decelerate the transition to new technology. Stricter standards push the industry toward electrification and advance powertrains faster. More relaxed standards allow traditional internal combustion engines to remain viable longer. A Buffett-style question would be, which path builds more durable competitive advantages for American companies in the global marketplace? Consider this. While American policy debates the pace of fuel efficiency improvements, China has aggressively pushed electrification. Chinese EV manufacturers have developed significant capabilities and are now competing globally. European regulations have also been pushing toward electrification. If American automakers optimize for a regulatory environment with relaxed standards, do they risk falling behind in developing the technologies that may dominate global markets? Or do relaxed standards allow American companies to invest more carefully and avoid the mistakes of forced, premature technology adoption? This is not a simple question with an obvious answer, but it's the right question to ask when thinking long-term. Buffett has often emphasized that businesses thrive on predictability. Berkshire Hathaway's subsidiaries plan for the long term, invest in infrastructure and equipment that lasts decades, and build business models on stable, understandable economics. The automotive industry operates on similar time horizons. Developing a new vehicle platform typically takes 5-7 years. Building a new manufacturing plant represents a multi-billion-dollar investment with a 20-30-year operational life. Training a workforce in new technologies requires years of investment. Now consider what the past decade has delivered. Standards set by Obama, rolled back by Trump, strengthened by Biden, and now rolled back again by Trump. That's 4 major regulatory shifts in roughly 12 years. From a business perspective, this creates enormous uncertainty. Should an automaker invest $10 billion in electric vehicle development if the regulatory drivers for EVs might disappear in the next administration? Should they invest in advanced internal combustion engine technology if that might become stranded investment when regulations tighten again? This regulatory instability itself has a cost. It forces companies to hedge their bets, invest in multiple technology paths simultaneously, and maintain flexibility rather than fully committing to the most efficient long-term strategy. All of this reduces capital efficiency. Buffett would likely observe that regardless of whether stricter or more relaxed standards are better policy, the constant flip-flopping is definitively bad for business planning and capital allocation. Uncertainty itself is costly.